It was a crisp autumn evening in November, around 7 p.m., as I made my way home after a late shift at the coffee shop. The sun had set, leaving the streets illuminated by the eerie glow of streetlights. Though I lived in a relatively safe neighborhood, that evening felt different as I walked my usual path. With my earbuds in, I listened to a podcast about unsolved mysteries when I noticed a figure trailing me from a distance. Initially, I dismissed it as just another person heading home. However, when I crossed the street to avoid a group of loud teenagers, I caught another glimpse of him, moving with unsettling intent. He was tall, dressed in a dark hoodie, his face obscured. My heart began to race. Approaching a dimly lit area near a park, I felt the urge to quicken my pace. His footsteps echoed behind me, growing louder. The podcast faded into silence, replaced by the thudding of my heartbeat. I turned a corner, hoping to find other pedestrians, but the street was empty. Panic began to creep in. "Hey!" he called out, his gravelly voice sending chills down my spine. "Wait up!" I quickened my steps, barely able to think. What did he want? My mind raced through possibilities. I considered calling someone, but my phone was tucked away in my purse, and I didn't want to risk stopping. "Come on, I just want to talk," he shouted, closing the distance. There was a sickening calmness in his tone. I spotted a convenience store a few blocks ahead and headed straight for it. As I reached the entrance, I glanced back. He was just a few feet away, his face illuminated by the streetlight. I could see his wide, intent eyes, and a chill ran down my spine. I pushed through the doors, the familiar jingle of the bell offering a fleeting sense of safety. Inside, the store was nearly empty, with a tired cashier behind the counter and a couple of shoppers meandering in the aisles. I darted to the back, pretending to browse snacks while keeping an eye on the entrance. My hands shook as I clutched a bag of chips, trying to appear nonchalant. Then, I spotted him outside, peering in. He scanned the interior, his gaze settling on me. My breath hitched as I ducked behind a shelf, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure the cashier could hear it. I could see through a narrow gap as he entered the store, his demeanor shifting to something more threatening. "Where are you?" he muttered, glancing around like a predator. Panic took hold. I knew I had to escape, but how? I felt trapped. My phone was still in my purse, but I didn't want to risk him seeing me leave from the front. I needed a different way out. Taking a deep breath, I cautiously peeked around the corner. He was now at the cashier, asking a question. I couldn't make out the words, but his tone was demanding. I spotted an emergency exit at the back, partially hidden behind promotional displays. I made my move. Quietly, I slipped past the aisles, praying he wouldn't look my way. Each step felt like an eternity. I reached the exit, my heart racing as I pushed the door open. The cool night air hit me like a wave of relief, but I didn't stop to breathe. I hurried down the alley next to the store, staying hidden. I could hear distant voices from the street, but I didn't dare look back. I kept my pace steady until I was well out of sight. Finally, I reached the main road, my chest heaving. I turned around, half expecting to see him chasing after me, but the street was empty. I pulled out my phone, hands trembling, and called a friend, recounting the night's events. I made it home safely, but a sense of dread lingered long after I locked the door. I couldn't shake the image of his eyes and the calmness in his voice. That night, I slept with the lights on, the sounds of the city outside feeling more menacing than usual. I still take that same route home every night, but I'm always looking over my shoulder, aware that danger could be lurking in the shadows. Let's not meet again.
It was a Friday night, and I was leaving my friend's birthday party, feeling a mix of joy and exhaustion. The clock read 11:30 p.m. as I stepped into the cool night air. I had parked a few blocks away, and the streetlights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows on the pavement. As I walked to my car, I noticed a man leaning against a lamppost at the corner. He wore a dark hoodie pulled over his head, obscuring his face. It was unsettling enough to make me quicken my pace, but I brushed it off as paranoia. I was just tired and ready to go home. I kept glancing back, and to my dismay, the man began walking in my direction. My heart raced as I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. Maybe he was just a late-night wanderer, I thought. But as I neared my car, I saw him picking up speed, closing the distance between us. "Hey, you dropped something," he called out, his voice low and gravelly. I turned, my stomach dropping. I hadn't dropped anything. He was now just a few feet away, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "What?" I replied, my voice shaking despite my efforts to sound casual. "Your phone, I think. You should check," he said, with a smirk, though I couldn't see his eyes behind the shadow of the hood. I glanced down, half expecting to see my phone on the ground. Of course, it wasn't there. Panic rose in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Thanks, but I have it," I said, backing away slowly toward my car. My heart pounded, and I could hear my breath echoing in my ears. He chuckled softly. "You're sure? Because it looks like you're in a hurry." I fumbled for my keys, hands shaking as I searched for the right one. "I just need to go," I said, my voice trembling. Suddenly he stepped closer, and I could see his face more clearly. He had an unsettling grin that made the hairs on my neck stand up. "I'm just trying to help, you know. It's a dangerous night." I felt my heart race as I quickly unlocked my car, throwing myself inside and slamming the door. I locked the doors just in time as he lunged toward the window, his face inches away from mine. "Don't be scared. I just want to talk," he said, his tone shifting to something more menacing. I could see his breath fogging the window. I backed away instinctively, fumbling for the ignition. "Leave me alone!" I shouted, my voice high-pitched and desperate. I saw him take a step back, but he wasn't done. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be," he said, his expression darkening. I turned the key in the ignition, praying it would start. It sputtered before roaring to life. I glanced in the rearview mirror to see him watching me, his grin now more like a snarl. With a surge of adrenaline, I threw the car into reverse, pressing hard on the gas. I swerved around the corner, looking back only once to see him standing in the street, lamplight illuminating his figure, as he yelled something I couldn't hear. Once on the main road, I felt the tension start to dissipate, but my heart still raced. I'd never felt that fear like that before. A few blocks later, I pulled over, hands shaking on the steering wheel. I took a deep breath, my mind racing with what had just happened. I drove home, trying to shake off the encounter, but the image of that man's grin haunted me. Even now, months later, I still feel that cold dread creeping in when I'm out alone at night. So, to the man in the hoodie who tried to help me on that cold Friday night, let's not meet again.
I was walking home from my late shift at the diner, the streets dimly lit by flickering streetlights. It was around 1:30 a.m., and the usual bustle of my neighborhood had faded into an eerie silence. My shift had been exhausting, the clattering of dishes and the hum of the coffee machine echoing in my ears. As I walked, I tried to shake off the lingering fatigue, focusing instead on the comforting thought of my warm bed. I took my usual shortcut through the vacant lot, overgrown with weeds and scattered debris. It was a path I'd walked countless times before, but tonight felt different. The air was heavy, saturated with an unsettling stillness that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I pulled my jacket tighter, wishing I had someone to walk with. Then I saw him. A man sat on a rusty swing, swaying back and forth, his silhouette barely illuminated by the dim streetlight. He wore a dark hoodie, the fabric worn and frayed, obscuring his face. I hesitated, instinct screaming at me to turn back, but I dismissed the thought. I needed to get home. As I approached, he stopped swinging and turned towards me. "Hey there," he said, his voice low and gravelly. A chill ran down my spine. "What's a girl like you doing out here so late?" "I'm just heading home. It's really late." He chuckled, though it lacked warmth. "Home? That's a nice place to be. You know, it's dangerous out here." He stepped closer, and I could finally see his face. Pockmarked skin, sunken eyes, and an unsettling grin that didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, I know, I said, taking a cautious step back, my heart racing. I should really get going. Don't be in such a hurry, he said, his tone playful, but his expression shifting to something more predatory. We could keep each other company for a while. I promise I don't bite. I glanced around, the empty lot feeling suddenly claustrophobic. My phone was in my pocket, but I didn't want to show any fear. I really can't, I said, forcing a laugh I didn't feel. I have to work in the morning. Just a few minutes, he insisted, stepping closer. What's the worst that could happen? You're not afraid of me, are you? The way he said it sent ice through my veins. I caught a glint of something metallic in his pocket, something that shifted as he moved. Panic surged through me. I needed to get away. I turned on my heel, breaking into a fast walk, my feet pounding against the gravel. Hey, where are you going? He called after me, his voice now mocking. I thought we were just talking. I felt his footsteps behind me, quickening as I fled. My heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears. I glanced over my shoulder and saw him gaining on me, that twisted grin still plastered on his face. Fear turned my blood to ice. I sprinted towards the street, praying a car would pass by. Suddenly, I spotted headlights in the distance. I pushed myself harder, adrenaline overriding my exhaustion. I reached the road just as a car approached. I waved my arms desperately, and the driver slowed, confusion etched on his face. Get in, now, I shouted, as I reached the passenger side, yanking the door open. I jumped inside, slamming the door shut just as I heard the footsteps behind me stop abruptly. The man was there, his face shadowed by the streetlight, eyes glinting with frustration and rage. Drive, I yelled to the driver, and he hit the gas. As we sped away, I risked a glance back. The man stood there, a dark figure in the rearview mirror, fists clenched at his sides. Once we were far enough away, the driver glanced at me, worry etched on his features. What happened back there? It's nothing, I managed to say, my voice trembling. Tears prickled at the corners of my eyes. But deep down, I knew it wasn't nothing. I finally made it home, the front door closing with a heavy thud behind me. I leaned against it, heart still racing, replaying every moment in my mind. I thought about that man, that chilling smile, and the way he had stalked me. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the terror that had rooted itself deep within me. Yet the image of him lingered, haunting me long after the adrenaline faded. Let's not meet again.
It was a chilly Thursday evening in November, around 7 p.m., when I stepped out of my apartment in downtown Seattle. I was heading to a small cafe a few blocks away to meet a friend for coffee. The sun had set, and the streetlights flickered to life, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. This route was familiar and usually felt safe. As I walked, I noticed a man lingering near the entrance of an alleyway, his posture tense, like a coiled spring. He wore a dark, hooded sweatshirt, and his face was partially obscured. I didn't think much of it at first, chalking it up to urban life. I quickened my pace, hoping to avoid any unwanted interaction. As I passed him, I heard him mumble, "Hey, you dropped something." I instinctively checked my pockets and shook my head. No, I didn't. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. "Are you sure? Because I think you did." I tried to move away, but he mirrored my steps. The tension in the air thickened, and my heart raced. "Seriously, I have to meet someone," I said, forcing calmness I didn't feel. He smirked, looking me up and down. "You don't even know me. How do you know I'm not someone you want to meet?" Panic clawed at my throat as I realized I was alone on this block, and the cafe was still a few minutes away. I could hear the hum of traffic, but felt completely isolated. "Look, I really need to go," I said, my voice shaking. Suddenly he stepped closer. "What's the hurry? We could chat for a bit. You seem interesting." I took a step back, nearly tripping over the curb. "I really can't, I'm late." I forced a smile that I hoped looked nonchalant, but inside I was spiraling. I turned to walk away, but he matched my pace, his footsteps heavy behind me. "You sure you don't want to get to know me? I could show you a good time." Bile rose in my throat, and every instinct screamed at me to run. I picked up my pace, my heart pounding like a drum. "I'm not interested," I shouted, trying to sound authoritative. His laughter pierced the air, cold and unfeeling. "You might be interested once you get to know me." With that, he grabbed my arm. It felt like ice against my skin, and I recoiled. Adrenaline surged through me, and I yanked my arm free, sprinting down the street. I could hear him call after me, his voice mocking, "Hey, where are you going? We were just starting to have fun." I darted into a nearby grocery store, breath coming in ragged gasps. The fluorescent lights felt harsh and disorienting. I ducked behind a shelf, trying to steady my racing heart. My mind raced with thoughts of what could have happened if I hadn't run. Peeking around the corner, I spotted him outside, scanning the pedestrians. I felt like a deer in headlights, frozen in fear. What if he followed me inside? I grabbed my phone and texted my friend, letting them know I was in trouble. Minutes felt like hours, and just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I saw my friend approaching. Relief washed over me as I signaled for them to come inside. They entered, confusion on their face. "What's going on?" Before I could explain, I turned to look out the door, and he was still there, watching. A chill ran down my spine. My friend noticed my gaze and turned to see what I was looking at. "Who's that?" "Just some guy," I whispered, voice trembling. "He's been out there for a while. Do you know him?" "No, I don't think he's safe," I replied, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. My friend stepped forward. "Let's just go. You're safe with me." As we exited, I kept my head down, heart pounding. I could feel his eyes on me, but we managed to slip past him. We hurried to the cafe, where I felt the safety of familiar faces and warm coffee. I never saw him again after that night, but the feeling of being hunted lingered. I still take that route sometimes, but the shadows seem darker now. Let's not meet again.
It was a chilly October evening, just before dusk, when I decided to take a shortcut through a quiet park on my way home from my shift at the diner. After a long day, the sun sank below the horizon, leaving a hazy orange glow. I thought the fresh air would do me good, even if it was just a brief walk through the trees. As I entered the park, the usual crowd was sparse. A couple of joggers passed by, and a few families were packing up their picnics. I picked up my pace, eager to get home, when I spotted a man sitting alone on a bench, his gaze fixed on the ground. He looked to be in his late 30s, wearing a worn baseball cap and a long, tattered coat that seemed out of place for the chilly weather. I slowed my pace, feeling an unsettling prickle on the back of my neck. It was the way he stared, like he was waiting for something. Or someone. "Hey there," he called out, his voice gravelly. "You got the time?" I glanced at my phone and then back at him. It's about 6. "Thanks," he said, but continued to watch me with an odd intensity. I tried to quicken my steps, but it felt like my legs had turned to lead. He stood up and began to walk in my direction, his gait unsteady. "You live around here?" he asked, closing the distance between us. "Just passing through," I replied tersely, hoping to brush him off. He chuckled, a low, unsettling sound. "Aren't we all just passing through, though? Life's a funny thing." I forced a smile and tried to walk past him. Just then, a sharp gust of wind caused the leaves to swirl around us, and I shivered, now acutely aware of our isolation. My heart raced as I quickened my pace. But he matched my speed, keeping just a few paces behind me. "What's your name?" he asked. I really need to go," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "Come on, don't be rude," he said, his tone shifting from casual to possessive. "You're not scared of me, are you?" I glanced back at him and my stomach dropped. His eyes had narrowed and there was a glint of something sinister behind them. Panic surged through me. I was only a few blocks from home, but I felt trapped in the park. I spotted a path that veered toward a busier street. "I'm just going this way," I said, hoping to lose him in the crowd. "Hey, wait!" his voice boomed, and he quickened his pace, closing the distance again. My instincts kicked in, and I sprinted toward the road. The fading light made visibility difficult, but I knew I needed to reach safety. I could hear his footsteps pounding behind me, growing closer with every stride. I burst out of the park and onto the main road, where a few cars were passing by. I glanced back and saw him stop at the edge of the park, his silhouette outlined against the dying light. "You can't run forever," he shouted, but I didn't stop to respond. I flagged down a car, heart racing, and when the driver rolled down the window, I blurted out, "Please, can you give me a ride? I think someone is following me." The driver's brows furrowed in concern, but he nodded and unlocked the doors. I jumped in, fumbling with the seatbelt as I glanced back to see the man still standing there, watching me with a horrible, triumphant smile. The driver took off and I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I couldn't shake the feeling of his gaze burning into my back. As we drove away, I couldn't help but think of how close I had come to being caught. Even now, weeks later, I can still feel that icy fear creeping back at night. I avoid that park like the plague, but the memory lingers, a chilling reminder of how quickly a normal evening can turn into a nightmare. Let's not meet again.